Here we go. Hello, Rumina.
Hi, Ron.
Thank you for joining us today.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the OCNI Town Hall Insights on Nuclear with the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. My name is Joseph Bastien. I'm the Manager of Special Projects for the Organization of Canadian Nuclear Industries. Our host today, Dr. Ron Oberth, President and CEO of Organization of Canadian Nuclear Industries, and our guest speaker, Ms. Rumina Velshi, President and CEO of the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. Dr. Oberth, handing things over to you.
Thank you, Joe, and hello to all of our colleagues who have logged in today to hear this webinar. And a special thanks to Ms. Velshi, or otherwise in my parley, I know her as Rumina, because I had the pleasure, the great pleasure of working with her earlier in her career. And at that time, I saw the great potential that young lady had to rise to great positions in the nuclear industry. So it's a special personal introduction today. Ms. Rumina Velshi is the President and CEO of Canada's independent regulator, the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, a position she was appointed to in August of 2018 for a 5-year term, shortly after serving on the commission for a number of years. And I also had the pleasure of appearing before the commission when Rumina was on the commission, and I had to appear absolutely dispassionate when I spoke to Ms. Velshi in that role. Rumina brings extensive technical and regulatory experience to this position, following a distinguished career in various roles at Ontario Hydro, Ontario Power Generation, as well as serving as a board member with the Ontario Energy Board. In her time as president of the CNSC, and you'll hear more about this from Rumina in a moment, but she's prioritized and championed a couple of initiatives that I think are very unique and will be the hallmark of her tenure, and that is regulatory readiness for innovation, both in Canada and internationally. And Rumina sees that international collaboration in terms of harmonizing regulatory requirements and reviews across multiple jurisdictions. And recognizing that international commitment, she was recently appointed as chairperson of the International Atomic Energy Agency's Committee on Safety Standards for a 4-year term. She's also a strong believer in building trust with communities, especially Indigenous communities, NGOs, and various stakeholders, and she'll be speaking to that in her discussion today. And finally, as we continue our series of webinars with women leaders in our industry, she's a great believer in diversity in the nuclear sector, and strongly promotes careers in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics for young women. She's a University of Toronto alum with both a bachelor's degree in applied sciences and engineering, a master's degree in chemical engineering, and an MBA. So she brings a broad base of education to her role. And in today's remarks, she'll also update us on how the CNSC has responded to this unprecedented pandemic that we're going through. So with that, I will turn the mic over to Ms. Velshi, and we look forward to your remarks, followed by which you and I will have a poolside chat.
Oh, I wish I was at a pool. Okay. Thank you, Ron, and the Organization of Canadian Nuclear Industries for the opportunity to tell you about how Canada's nuclear regulator has adapted and responded to the devastating COVID-19 global pandemic. In my remarks today, I will discuss how we have responded to ensure strong regulatory oversight, the safety of our staff, being flexible, and collaborating internationally so we can continue to share and learn from others. Ultimately, we have never lost sight of the importance of being a strong and trusted regulator. And I'll conclude with thoughts on how we come out of this pandemic even stronger, more resilient, and more effective. Next. The COVID-19 pandemic is the first global pandemic the world has had to fight since the Spanish flu of 1918. Aside from a limited number of experts and professionals who operate in the field, the world has been forced to respond to what most of us probably assumed was an unlikely event when the calendar turned to 2020. We are currently living in unprecedented times that can take a toll on the strongest of us. None of us know what the long-term impacts will be. While the response to the pandemic has shuttered many industries and disrupted the lives of countless people, some industries have not been able to shut down due to the important role they play in our lives. In many countries, the nuclear industry has an important role in keeping the lights on, keeping us cool or warm, keeping our food safe, keeping us connected, and plays a vital role in our healthcare system. In Canada, that is definitely the case in Ontario and New Brunswick. But even in the midst of a pandemic, we cannot and would never allow nuclear facilities to operate in an unsafe manner. That is why it was so crucial for nuclear operators to be ready and for us as the regulator to ensure they were able to continue their operations safely. Next. Building off lessons learned during the SARS pandemic in the early 2000s, both the CNSC and licensees of major nuclear facilities updated their business continuity plans to address pandemics. It is in fact a license requirement to have updated business continuity plans for these licensees. Those plans ensured we were able to have the right people in place from the very beginning and have them healthy and supported to continue to work effectively and meet our respective mandates. At the CNSC, we were closely monitoring the progression of the virus around the world in late February and early March. As the virus swept the globe, we knew that extraordinary measures needed to be taken, and so my executive team and I activated a pandemic business continuity plan on Sunday, March the 15th, and as of Monday, March the 16th, all CNSC staff were told to work remotely. Our business continuity plan is exercised and updated regularly, but the type of working arrangements that we are in right now had never been tested on that larger scale. And in spite of that, our staff were able to quickly establish communication with licensees across the country, from the smallest to the largest. The first few weeks were challenging for sure, similar to what OPG CEO Ken Hartwig recounted last week during his chat with the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. It took a few weeks before all of our staff could have reliable access to our internal network. But from day one, we had our absolutely essential people online and working effectively to continue meeting our mandate and ensuring the continuity of critical business. Before long, everyone had full access to our network and the tools that they needed, and we have been operating very effectively in this new normal since about mid-April. In fact, I can say with great confidence that throughout the pandemic, we have not missed a beat in our regulatory oversight. Next. Leadership was key to enabling us to pivot quickly to be effective in this new environment. I'm proud of the leadership the CNSC has displayed, especially in the priority and steps taken to ensure the wellness of our staff. The health and safety of our staff has always been a top priority, but that has never been more true than during this pandemic. We quickly set up a dedicated information page for our employees to keep informed. Management established close contact with staff on a daily basis at the beginning of this new normal. And we augmented our health support to employees to ensure everyone would have ready virtual access to healthcare professionals. And to maintain a sense of community, we have held regular all-staff town halls and invited mental health experts, and frontline workers to share their guidance and experience. These town halls have been very popular and well received. Many staff have commented on how important the town halls have been to maintain a sense of community, so essential when we are physically separate. I have provided weekly or even more frequent updates to CNSC staff with the best information available. We have encouraged staff to strive to find a proper work-life balance, something so challenging when the lines between work and home are so blurred, and to reach out if they feel they need help and offered guidance on how to manage through the crisis. You can see on this slide in front of you a pictogram our creative communication staff produced of my guidance on how to manage through the crisis. It's what we call our ABCs of managing during COVID-19, being accessible, establishing boundaries, communication, decisiveness, empathy, and flexibility. And our internal surveying has showed that the vast majority of our employees have responded well to this new work environment, and most are thriving and frankly even more productive than ever before. But not all have. Some feel isolated and disconnected. Some are struggling with tending to elderly parents or the challenges of home care or homeschooling of their children. This is compounded by the uncertainty over the return of childcare services or schooling in the fall. Regardless of what the new normal work environment looks like once we get past this pandemic, we will continue to support our staff to ensure they are able to work as safely, securely, and effectively. It is vitally important that our staff are able to work well because we have important work to do. Next. Upon activating our business continuity plan, our immediate focus was to maintain regulatory oversight of Canada's nuclear facilities, especially those related to critical infrastructure services such as electricity generation, healthcare, and sterilization. It should be no surprise that this crisis has required us to quickly make adjustments to how we maintain oversight and enforce compliance. Our emphasis on being an agile organization and one committed to continuous improvement has served us and our regulated community very well. Those qualities have resulted in opportunities to develop new and innovative ways of working. That includes remote inspections, which were rapidly developed and implemented and have proven very successful and cost-effective. It also meant desktop inspections accompanied by teleconferences or video conferences with licensees. CNSC inspectors have continued surveillance and monitoring activities remotely by participating in licensees' daily meetings, as well as monitoring licensee corrective action programs. Due to the success of this approach, we intend to continue with remote inspections throughout the duration of the pandemic and likely even after in certain circumstances. Next. We have been sensitive to the unique challenges this crisis presents and have recognized from the outset the need for regulatory flexibility to enable our licensees to continue operating without compromising safety. That included a focus on ensuring critical service providers obtained all necessary licensing and certification requirements without delay. Those actions included accelerated approval of medical isotope transportation and quickly preparing for new license requests for medical equipment sterilization, including N95 masks, which have been so important to frontline workers. This unprecedented time also led us to prepare to exercise regulatory flexibility or provide temporary relief to licensees from regulatory requirements. When those requests came in, we were able to work promptly with licensees to identify alternative safe options for meeting regulatory requirements on, for example, shift complement and personnel certification, reporting, and cost recovery. Licenses have risen to the challenge as well. I am pleased to confirm that there have been no safety significant events at any of our licensed facilities throughout the pandemic. Next. We have been able to maintain strong regulatory oversight over major nuclear projects. Even in the midst of this crisis, the CNSC continued its oversight of OPG's refurbishment of Unit 2 at Darlington. Satisfied that all work was done safely and properly, the CNSC gave its final authorization to OPG in early June, and the refurbished reactor was reconnected to the electricity grid on schedule. That successful project relied heavily on the extensive and important domestic supply chain that many of you joining today play a key part in. This supply chain proved itself to be reliable and dependable, especially during these exceptional circumstances. For the first time in the CNSC's history, our specialists and inspectors had to monitor OPG's on-site activities remotely in order to authorize progression of the project. Moreover, they had to do that while using innovative and new technologies to adapt to the new operational reality, all without compromising safety. CNSC staff were able to ensure regulatory requirements were being met by accessing secure facility networks, obtaining regular station briefings, reviewing licensee activities, asking questions, confirming data, and requesting corrective actions when needed. Having Darlington Unit 2 connected to the grid safely and on schedule is a testament of the strong expertise, dedication, and depth that exists in the Canadian nuclear sector. I'm pleased to report that we have advanced to the point where, working together and following all COVID-19 related restrictions and accommodations, CNSC staff have now been able to resume some of our in-person inspections. Necessity, of course, often drives the adoption or development of new technologies, and the COVID crisis has done just that. Beyond the various video conferencing technologies we have quickly come to rely on, including the one we're using today, we are seeing a greater use of remote monitoring equipment for compliance verification and data analytics to look at data more systematically. As we continue to navigate our way through this pandemic, and once we get on the other side of it, I expect lessons learned will result in several other innovative technologies and approaches quickly being proposed by licensees. Next. You have probably heard me previously discuss the importance of regulators not impeding innovation in the nuclear sector, so long as a safety case can be demonstrated. With new and innovative technologies already in our midst and others likely just over the horizon, this crisis has reinforced the need for regulators to be agile enough to be prepared for whatever might come our way. Navigating this crisis has allowed us to demonstrate our agility and to seize opportunities for improvement. It has encouraged us to adopt the mindset that agility will be key to almost everything we do going forward. Our response throughout the pandemic bodes well for regulatory readiness for the future. Small modular reactors are an example of an innovative technology that requires regulatory readiness. We have already been called on to show our readiness as our review of the first SMR proposal in Canada has continued throughout the COVID pandemic. We have also continued our pre-licensing reviews of 11 different vendor designs of SMRs, which are at various phases of the process. This work is likely to take on an increased urgency following remarks by the Minister of Natural Resources, Seamus O'Regan, at the February 2020 Canadian Nuclear Association Annual Conference. Minister O'Regan announced that the Government of Canada, in conjunction with partners across the country, will launch an SMR action plan in the fall of 2020 as a follow-up to the SMR roadmap released in the fall of 2018 to outline progress and ongoing efforts to make SMRs a reality in Canada. As an independent and objective regulator, we will remain neutral on the prospects for SMRs, but will follow the process closely to ensure we are ready if momentum for adoption of the technology takes hold. The agreement signed by the premiers of New Brunswick, Ontario, and Saskatchewan in December 2019 to explore how to realize the potential of SMRs suggests that the momentum might be accelerating. And we will continue to collaborate with our international counterparts, including the United States and the United Kingdom, to advance global efforts to ensure preparedness for SMRs. Last year, we signed an agreement with the United States Nuclear Regulatory Commission to guide this important work, and we hope to do the same shortly with the United Kingdom's Office for Nuclear Regulation. Canada has made a commitment to reducing greenhouse gas emissions to combat climate change. SMRs may be one attractive option in support of those efforts. The Canadian nuclear industry is well placed to play a big role in advancing this technology and other innovations. Whether we ultimately end up with 0, 1, or dozens of SMRs across the country, the prospect of their adoption is already generating concerns by some of the public. That is a preoccupation for the CNSC because building and maintaining public trust has been a priority of mine since joining the CNSC. I am committed to trying to understand and address concerns related to how we execute our role or mandate. Next. CNSC conducted polling for the first time ever in February this year to see the level of public confidence in us, the regulator. That polling largely confirmed that there is confidence in the CNSC as the nuclear regulator. It also highlighted areas where we could do better. Those areas related primarily to a lack of adequate consultation of communities, particularly during the time in between licensees, and a perceived lack of adequate independence of the regulator from industry. The public wants assurance that in our pursuit of ensuring safety, we are committed to cooperating, sharing information, and engaging in two-way communication. This is especially important during this global pandemic. While there is a great history of collaboration within the nuclear sector, both nationally and internationally, to understand and address safety and environmental issues, more can and must be done to bring those on the outside who are interested and genuinely concerned into the discussion. That expanded conversation will be even more important as advanced nuclear technologies such as small modular reactors are proposed. If not done well, it can result in stalled or delayed or cancelled nuclear projects, as happened recently in Canada with the cancellation of the proposed deep geological repository for the disposal of low and intermediate level radioactive waste. Although the science supported the safety case, the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation did not support the project, and OPG therefore cancelled the project after undergoing more than a 15-year regulatory process. I have long believed that Canada's nuclear licensing and regulatory processes are some of the most open, transparent, thorough, and accommodating ones in the world. International peers have also confirmed this. We welcome all perspectives to the table and often provide funding to support public participation. But we obviously need to do more or do things differently. The polling results have motivated us to rethink approaches to trust building based on shared values, more meaningful participation, better listening, and continuous evaluation. We are committed to doing better going forward. This includes revisiting how our commission proceedings are conducted and exploring the use of technologies to better engage with stakeholders and Indigenous groups, even during these unprecedented times. We have already taken steps in that direction. We held our first virtual commission proceeding last month. The success of this format suggests it will be possible to bring more people into the discussion and in a more convenient way going forward. We are deploying new virtual tools to help with online public consultations, including a pilot of a new platform called Bang the Table. And we're being innovative in our approach to engagement and consultation with Indigenous peoples, especially on the 5 active federal environmental assessments we are currently managing. Using virtual meetings and the creation of collaborative documents, we are working with communities on how to better assess Indigenous knowledge and conduct rights impact assessments, including flexibility on timelines for the presentation of materials. We're exploring the creation of a public registry with a goal that stakeholders and Indigenous groups will have ready access to all related information that is not subject to restrictions. Through these efforts, we hope to encourage greater information sharing, transparency, and collaboration among the public, the regulator, and the regulated community. Our commitment is to include everyone with an interest in our processes so that all information and perspectives are considered. This will hopefully result in confidence that the best informed decision is taken in every instance while building public trust in the CNSC as Canada's nuclear regulator and our commitment to safety above all else. Next. That commitment to safety is one I know is shared by all in Canada's nuclear sector, but also one shared among our international partners and colleagues in the global nuclear community. Leveraging that commitment to support lessons learned and continuous improvement is important, and we have been doing so throughout the pandemic. As part of our immediate response to the pandemic, we enhanced our communications with key bilateral nuclear regulators and international organizations such as the International Atomic Energy Agency, or the IAEA, the Nuclear Energy Agency, and the International Nuclear Regulators Association. The CNSC executive team and I have participated in international webinars to discuss the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on the nuclear industry, to share our experiences and to learn from theirs. In my role as chair of the IAEA's Commission on Safety Standards, I called on the IAEA to share lessons learned amongst the member states. I have also asked for a review and modifications of the safety standards to incorporate these lessons learned. It has been encouraging that many of the decisions and actions taken in nuclear countries by regulators and operators have been very similar, if not identical, even though taken independently. That speaks very well to the importance of our regular and substantial collaboration and a willingness to adopt and adapt best practices. As we have previously seen in the aftermath of significant incidents or developments in the nuclear or other sectors, the CNSC is continuously identifying lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic and incorporating any relevant best practices or improvements identified. Lessons learned not only from the nuclear sector, but also from other sectors in Canada and globally, such as oil and gas and meat processing, to identify any potential deficiencies in our regulatory framework that can be mitigated. No opportunity is being overlooked to learn and improve from this crisis so that we can emerge even stronger than before. We will continue to develop innovative methods and processes to engage safely, proactively, and regularly with the public and consult Indigenous groups. We will continue conducting some of our commission proceedings remotely while ensuring that the process remains fair, safe, transparent, and accessible. And we will build capacity and put in place the infrastructure, processes, and the culture that will improve efficiency and make the CNSC stronger and more resilient in the long term. Next. I am extremely proud of the way we have worked and continue to operate during this pandemic. We have maintained our oversight of the industry while ensuring that the public and environment remains protected throughout these unprecedented challenges. There is much to be proud of in the global response to this pandemic. Governments and their agencies, international organizations, companies, and citizens have collaborated on many successes and demonstrated a global resilience. Some glaring weaknesses were also made clear, such as delays in closing our borders, shortages of personal protective equipment, respirators, ventilators, and bed space, and not adequately identifying the high-risk populations and activities. This pandemic has also brought to the surface unsettling questions and scenarios that most have not even begun to contemplate, that we do not have the answers for right now, but which we will undoubtedly need to turn our attention to. For example, as bad as this pandemic is and has been, what if it had been 10 or even 100 times more severe in its scope and spread? How much more devastating could it have been if access to reliable electricity was disrupted and the ability to provide healthcare, safe food and water, heating and cooling, and reliable communication had been compromised? Nuclear power facilities have continued to operate safely, in large part due to the prudent planning and processes in place, and of course the strong regulatory oversight. But those facilities require key staff on site, including in the control rooms. If this virus had been more contagious while airborne, faster acting, and more severe in its symptoms and death rate, would those plants have been able to continue operating safely? We have an important history of assessing, simulating, and preparing for unlikely events in the nuclear sector, but those often focus on technical, malevolent, and geological events. Are we up for the challenge of preparing for and having contingencies in place to respond to a virus unthinkable until now? This is not a challenge unique to the nuclear sector, but given the important role that the sector plays in so many lives around the world and our history of collaboration and leadership, I think we need to help start the conversation. Among us are many experts in all things nuclear, but I do not think the same can be said for expertise in pathogens. We will need to draw in and perhaps rely on expertise and perspectives that we are not accustomed to. It will not be an easy road, and we will need to draw into the conversation everyone who wants to be a part of it. Next. Based on my long experience with the nuclear sector, I think we are up for that challenge. We owe it to the people we keep safe, the people to whom the industry provides electricity, medical isotopes, sterilization, and irradiation to, and to ourselves to rise to that challenge. The CNSC has a proud history of continuous learning and improvement, collaboration and innovation and agility, and of being a leader. We are ready to play our part. We must be willing and ready to work together to ensure an even safer, more secure, resilient, and better future, and I am confident we will collectively rise to the challenge. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rumina. Those remarks were very timely and very inspiring. Before I get into our poolside chat, and since this is virtual, we'll just pretend that we're near a virtual pool, and maybe with some palm trees in the background and a pina colada on its way. I want to shout out to Claire Catrice, who was very helpful in planning and getting this webinar together. And I also want to recognize Joe and Nav once again for the technical support on this. Rumina, thank you very much for mentioning the role of the supply chain that it plays in keeping our facilities operating. And I also want to recognize that it was through the efforts of OPG and Bruce Power in maintaining their commitment to product delivery during this crisis that allowed our supply chain really to be very healthy through this entire episode. The other thing I just want to make a note on, throughout your presentation, the comment that hardship is the mother of innovation was so apparent, that how you and your team and others in the industry have innovated. But I would also add an amendment to that, and I think that leadership is also a mother of invention. And I think you exemplify that by committing your staff and your organization to saying, we've got to continue to do what we do, and we'll continue to do it well, and let's find innovative ways of doing that. So, Ms. Velshi, aside from some of the things you talked about the response to the pandemic, what are some of the other things over the last 2 years that have given you some special memories or thoughts about what it's like heading Canada's nuclear regulatory body?
So Ron, let me respond to that on what I think has had probably the most impact on me from an emotional perspective, from a learning and a sense of accomplishment. And it actually starts with the pandemic because it's the most recent one. I think one of the most memorable memory, talk about redundancies, is when we had our first town hall. So it was 3 weeks after we invoked our business continuity plan. It was early April. And it was on Zoom, and most of our employees showed up for that. So it was the first time that we were seeing each other virtually, but it was the first time we saw each other. And it was just such a very special, unique moment. And you could virtually feel the energy that was in that room because people were just so relieved that everyone was doing fine, that they could see each other. And it really, to me, emphasized on how tight-knit a family the CNSC is. And that was, it was just so apparent in that moment. And with Zoom, where we have a chat line, it was just the tone in that chat line of people wanting to just find how everyone was doing, reaching out, there to help. And it was just, it was, you know how, I mean, I've come to Canada as a refugee, and I've been involved in many natural disasters. And, you know, when you've gone through those kinds of hardships, and then when you come together as a family where you've been, you know, thrown all over the place, it was that kind of an emotion that we there together, we've gone through kind of the rough patch, and hopefully there's better life ahead of us. So for me, that was extremely powerful experience. From an accomplishment perspective, you know, we finished 2 peer reviews, both on our emergency preparedness review, the EPREV. We were the first G7 country to go through that. And we also went through an international regulatory review service that looked at our overall regulatory framework, and came out of both of those very strongly with kudos. So, you know, again, a testament of how strong our regulatory framework, but even all our stakeholders collectively are when it comes to emergency preparedness and oversight of this sector. I think another highlight for me, and it's part of technology, innovation, and collaboration, is the Memorandum of Understanding between the CNSC and the US NRC that we signed last year. Because it, again, is symbolic of a few things. It's symbolic of the relationship, the very strong relationship we have with the US NRC. it's symbolic of the collaboration and us taking a leadership role, the two countries, in promoting greater harmonization of requirements when it comes to SMRs, of joining efforts when it comes to licensing of SMRs, because Chairman Sviniki and I both truly believe that unless there are standardized designs, SMRs probably have a very limited future. And I think getting that MOU and the framework we have developed after that and working collaboratively, again, was pretty much a highlight. You mentioned in the introduction my appointment as the chair of the Commission on Safety Standards of the IAEA. That should be a source of great pride for this country, because it again recognizes the role, the leadership role Canada plays, but it's also a recognition of the CNSC as a mature regulator. And I was very pleased with that. And then last year, the CNSC was also awarded one of the top 100 employers in the National Capital Region, a reflection of our commitment to our employees, their health and safety, their well-being, attracting and retaining the top talent. And frankly, Ron, no disrespect to you, because you and I have spent many, many years working together, but the talent and expertise at the CNSC is incomparable. There's just some really bright people there, and very dedicated, committed people. And a very particular highlight are the different ceremonies that I have participated in with our Indigenous communities. My good friend Laurie Swami was kind enough to invite me to a ceremony that the NWMO was hosting last year. And then at Point Lepreau, I was at another one last year as well, and very poignant, touching, powerful ceremonies. One of the reasons, and again, Ron, you touched on that in your introduction of me, that I accepted this role was because it gives me a platform to promote women in science, technology, engineering, and math. And I think over the last couple of years, we have made significant strides. And I hope we get a chance to talk a bit more about that. But I think even moving the STEM agenda, something to be proud of. And then lastly, I want to finish off with our trust agenda. And you heard me talk about that, how critical building, strengthening public trust is for the future of the sector and for our effectiveness as the regulator. And we now have what I believe, after the polling that we did, which was the first time ever that the CNSC has done any public polling, I think we've got a very solid strategy that we can start moving ahead with and get some real great results come out of that. So in a snapshot, a whole lot. It's been a great 2 years. It's been a great ride. I'm really, really pleased with how the CNSC has done, and I look forward to my next 3 years.
Okay. They will go by very quickly. You mentioned the recognition that the Canadian regulatory agency, your agency, has internationally. And I think that's largely because of the great leadership that has been at the helm of the CNSC over the years. And of course, great leaderships attracts great people, as you've just mentioned, what a great team you have, and inspires that team to do so well. And I've often thought you have very big shoes to fill because of those great leaders, but I think you've probably overflowed those shoes excessively. So I congratulate you on that. Rumina, I just want to quickly touch on SMRs because they come up all the time. And I'm very proud that our organization, you've mentioned 11 SMRs are going through various stages of regulatory review. My little team, and I'm very proud of them, has put, or will have by September, had 10 supplier forums introducing those SMRs to the supply chain so that the Canadian supply chain can engage and hopefully make those SMRs, or the ones that are selected, very Canadian. But I think compared to what your organization has to do, which is review those designs, that's a whole different level of workload. So how has your team managed to embrace those new designs, innovative designs, and do the great job they're doing?
So it's been a big challenge, and I mean the team has risen to it till now. I don't know how sustainable it is to proceed with 10 designs.
Yeah.
And remember, none of them are can-do designs. So these are all new technologies with a steep learning curve for our teams to come up to. But again, they have risen to the challenge. They have learned technologies. They've leveraged their different relationships and reached out to expertise in other parts of the world. And I think the MOU that we have with the USNRC is again our attempt at how do we maximize and optimize the limited resources that we have by collaborating with others. So can we jointly review designs? Can we borrow from theirs and build from theirs and not duplicate efforts which everyone benefits from? So I think there are those aspects that we're looking at. But I think the one that I have certainly been trying to push with both industry and government is you need to shortlist the different technologies that you're interested in, which will make life for the regulator much easier and allow us to manage better with the different ones there. So I'm hoping over the next few months or year, we actually just have a handful of technologies we can focus our efforts on. But we've been managing okay so far. Yeah.
Good. Well, and I'm sure you haven't had to drive your staff too hard because they're so inspired, and it must be exciting reviewing new technologies.
That's right. That is
Probably
right.
a great time to be at the CNSC. I also want to touch on Indigenous engagement, which was an important part of your discussion and how important that is. So how would you, I know that you're not in the role of advising SMR developers, but if you theoretically could, what advice would you give to one of the VSMR developers who is looking at locating their VSMR near an Indigenous territory to provide clean power and energy? How would you advise them on the engagement with those local populations?
I think from what we have seen, and I touched a bit on the low and intermediate level DGR on how, and I'm not saying that it wasn't done right, but how critical having the Indigenous community support is for any project to proceed. And so my first advice is you've got to make this a priority. You've got to start early. You need to get into those communities, get to know them, understand their issues, their needs, their priorities, explain what you are about, get their input, engage them. I think that is critical. But I think the underlying premise of all this is you want to build long-term trusting relationships. You need to make personal contact, and you need to be working together and progressing the reconciliation agenda. I think those are all very, very critical pieces. The sector has done some really great work. I mean, the CNSC, they can always reach out to us to get help from us, maybe piggyback on the relationships that we may have already established in those areas. But, as I look at some of our licensees, and particularly the big ones, whether it's the chemicals and the uranos on the mining side or on the nuclear power plant, the OPGs, the Bruce Power, and Point Lepreau, and the NWMO. I mean, they have best practices when it comes to Indigenous engagement, building relationships. And so I would strongly advise these newcomers or proponents to reach out to them and see what they can learn.
Yeah.
And share those best and implement those best practices. And I know we at the CNSC are always on the lookout to see what we can learn and improve from. And the TMX project, which has frankly raised the bar quite high, is something that we're trying to aspire to as well. So key is be there, for the long term, make a commitment for building strong relationships and working and engaging with the communities.
Well, Rumina, I hope some of our SMR developers are on the line. If not, we will certainly share this recording with them because that's a message that they should hear. We also talked about risk, or risk is a big part of what you guys do, managing risk and assisting the public in their perception of risk. The pandemic has brought risk to everybody's front door. I mean, I'm getting on an airplane in 10 days to fly to Vancouver, and that's probably a risky thing to do, which I'm willing to undertake for family. But I'm wondering, do you think the public has modified or adjusted its perception of risk, nuclear risk, in the light of what we're undergoing through right now with pandemic-related risks?
I think that's such an interesting question, Ron, and I think that's one that really needs a follow-up. I was in a Nuclear Energy Agency webinar earlier this week or last week. I'm losing track of time. And I was talking about public trust as being a critical element of defense in depth and resilience. We normally think of defense in depth and resilience from a technical side, from physical structure, the dual safety system kind of thing. But I see this public trust and confidence as part of the need for defense in depth and for resilience. And I remember having this discussion with Bill Magwood because he asked something very similar. Have you gone out to the public post-pandemic to find out how their risk perception has changed? And I'd like to think that there is a better appreciation. As I look at our polling results in Canada that we did with some of my fellow regulators, particularly in the Scandinavian countries, where the regulator there for decades enjoy a very high level of confidence. But it's a strong correlation with the confidence the public has in their government institutions, in their leaders. And so I think that's something we should also look at, is if the public feels that the leaders, the government, the institutions have done a great job at responding to the pandemic, my sense is it'll spill over certainly to the CNSC. But I think another thing that may change the picture, because the nuclear sector has been kind of the silent workhorse. It's delivered on the electricity, on the medical isotopes, no fuss, no muss, it's been there. But as I've looked, and this is not me promoting the sector at all, but as a Canadian, the nuclear sector has been there for their communities, whether it is on the donation of masks or building pop-up hospitals or innovation in coming up with face shields or in myriad other ways. And I know one of our licensees' tagline is "We're here for you," right, to their community. That has to bode well in building greater public trust in the sector. But the piece that you have mentioned, Ron, with your flight in 10 days' time, I think the public now understands that you have to balance between risks and benefits. And I think that greater awareness of what are the risks, greater dependency or appreciation of what the science, what the experts, what advice comes from them, I'm hoping all those bode well in putting the risk from nuclear in better perspective and thereby building greater trust in those who normally talk about it.
Yeah.
Be interesting to see how this unfolds, actually.
Yeah. When I call Air Canada to book, I always empathetically say, I hope you guys are going to be okay, because the lady on the phone just saw, a third of her workforce being let go. So we have to show empathy. I mean, we're shielded from some of those real world impacts. Rumina, I wanted to save, and I've saved some time at the end, because I do want to get back to gender diversity and one of your passions. As you may know, we had Lori Swamy on our call last week. So we're actually having a bit of a series of women leaders in the industry. I had the great pleasure of watching you and Lori and two other articulate women leaders on the WIN, Women in Nuclear seminar 2 weeks ago. And I just want to ask you, do you think you're seeing a shift in our industry towards greater appreciation of the attributes and special skills that women leaders can now bring that we maybe did not appreciate 20 years ago or 30 years ago?
So I'd like to say yes, Ron. And I'm not saying that with a whole lot of great confidence, and I'll tell you why. Because I just this week saw results of a survey that Women in Nuclear just has completed. And it looked at responses from women in the sector around their thoughts of their workplaces and opportunities and how they get treated. And in parallel, Wynn also asked the different players in the sector, tell us about the representation of women. And the second part is very dismal, in my opinion, because the needle has hardly moved. It's still in the early 20% that you see women in the sector. But what makes me feel more optimistic about it is, as I speak, certainly to the senior leaders in the sector, they know and they are truly committed to improving the diversity within their organizations, the value that women bring, the need to have more women, especially as we want to change the image of this industry, to try to attract that greater talent and recognition that having that diverse thought is going to make the business better. And I know a picture says 1,000 words. So if you can just put up my backup slide, Joe. And I'm hoping while Joe's doing this, but I'm hoping that through the pandemic, where there's been so much focus on the role leadership has played in how well countries have done, that there'll be a greater appreciation of the different perspective that women bring to things. And this picture says it all, right? To say anything else. And so I'm, it was after that WIN webinar, by the way, Ron, that one of my male employees forwarded this to me, and I said, the next opportunity I get, I'll show it to a broader audience. But I'm hoping that as we move forward, that there is a recognition that not only is it morally the right thing to do, it's the right business decision to make, and we just need to do a much better job and take a leadership role in that. So me personally, within the CNSC, we can take this slide off, thanks. Within the CNSC, I've got a Women in STEM initiative. Me and many other senior women and men in the nuclear sector have started an initiative called DAWN, Driving Advancement of Women in Nuclear. And I've been invited to work on at an international level on international gender champions, again with the recognition that the sector needs to do a better job in attracting, retaining, promoting women.
Well, Rumina, if I can add to that, I think one of the things that's going to start to move that needle is when young women are looking at careers in nuclear and they see Rumina Velshi as the head of the CNSC, they say Laurie Swamy, the head of NWMO, and in September, Stephanie Smith is going to be the new head of the Can-Do Owners Group. Right. So just like Barack Obama has inspired a generation of Black people, I think you three ladies and many others, and I can't name them all, are going to have a huge influence, which young women didn't have 20 years ago. But let's go back to when you were, well, an even younger woman. Who were some of the people that mentored you and inspired you to progress in the career that you've done?
It was both men and women, and I don't know if I'd call them mentors, but there were certainly many who have and continue to have great influence on me and my career. And I'll focus on the women because I think you're absolutely right, Ron. I think having mentors, seeing someone in a role that you can see yourself reflected in is critical. And there is something, and I need to share that because of something you just said right now. Oprah Winfrey, a few years ago, it was as part of the Me Too movement, and she made a speech, and then there was this long drive on Oprah for president. But what I remembered from her speech was not about the Me movement, but it was she was talking about when she was a little girl, sitting on the linoleum floor of her mother's living room, watching TV, and watched Sidney Poitier get the Best Actor Oscar award. And she thought, wow, a Black person can get that award. I too can strive for that. And that's what I remember. And I think it's having those kind of role models that one should never underestimate the power and the importance of people seeing someone who they feel they could be like. So for me and Ron, there are people who, because our careers have crisscrossed in the past, you'll remember, Claudette Lassonde was probably one of the first ones I started at, like just an absolute dynamite, a woman of tremendous vision and drive. And Linda McRae was somebody else, someone with tremendous, not only elegance about her, but just a style about her. Dr. Moira McDill, who was a commission member when I first joined the commission, who conveyed the importance of the need to be kind to the interveners who come, because this is a very formidable, formal process, and trying to put them as much at ease. And I mean, I think the list goes on. And as I said, there have been just as many men, but I think, this is something us in this sector can appreciate. You've got to have critical mass in order to have sustainability. And it's the same with women. You've got to have enough of them in different positions in order to make the kind of difference we want to make. And I don't know, I'm sorry I missed the session Lori was on with you last week. And I don't know if she spoke about some of the initiatives we have under our DAWN, the Driving Advancement of Women in Nuclear initiatives. But it's all around we've picked 3 key priority areas that we want to work on. But one of them, a big part of it is how do we connect more women with each other so there can be greater mentoring and support possibility in that.
Rumina, your mention of Claudette, I worked with her at OPG. She was a wonderful person. And as you know, we lost her so early in her career. It's just so heartbreaking. Maybe just a corollary. So let's say you're now chatting with a young woman who's sitting next to you. What advice would you give her if she were to say, Rumina, I want to progress a career in nuclear? Any thoughts on the mentoring that you would, personal mentoring you would give?
And so Ron, I do a fair bit of that. Of course, it depends on who the person is and their particular circumstances. But I speaking more generically, I have found, and I don't like to generalize though, but it's so common that women just tend to hold back and feel that the recognition will come in due course. I don't need to know everything. Surely people know what my contribution is, and they get overlooked for opportunities as a result because it's unknown, and especially now as we work remotely and it's kind of out of sight, out of mind, so one of my strongest advice I give to young, and it's not just young women, but to women is be seen, be heard, but make sure you've got something substantive to say, but be at the table. because it's only by demonstrating what you have to offer and then talk about it and not hold it back thinking people will know. Let it be known what you're interested in, where you want to go, so that people can look out for opportunities for you, as opposed to, well, they should have known. I think there's women just tend to be a bit more passive as opposed to taking charge about that. So that is one. The second one is really about getting outside one's comfort zone. As my good friend Adrian Kelby says, your comfort zone is your enemy, and never forget that. And the need to get out, because learning and growth will only come if you get outside the comfort zone. When I moved to Ottawa for my role at the CNSC, it's the first time I actually left home. Even for university, I stayed at home. And, at this late stage in my life, that was a big move because my husband didn't want to move with me and I had to move out on my own. So I don't think it ever stops, right? We need to just get outside our comfort zone. I think that is number two. The hard work and the learning always come in there, but to exude confidence. And one calls it good luck, but it's always being prepared for opportunities, because that's what good luck is, when you have an intersection of opportunities and preparedness. So looking out for those. I think those would be kind of my top three ones.
Okay. And I hope there are some young women, and I'm sure there are on the line today, that will listen to that and embrace that. And the corollary to that is some advice to men is maybe we shouldn't always be so loud and aggressive, and we should sort of recognize and encourage the women. And I'm very fortunate on my team to have some very competent young ladies in my organization, one of whom you haven't met yet. She's on the line, Navneet Dhaliwal. And the reason I raise, can you unmute your camera, Navneet? I'm going to introduce you to Rumina.
Ms. Dhaliwal, your camera's still open.
Because on July 24th, we're doing a webinar that Navneet organized on diversity and inclusion in the nuclear sector. So, Nav, are you there? She hasn't taken your advice. She's being shy right now. Anyway, well, while we're waiting for Nav to come up, and then the other thing I wanted to mention to those on the line is on July the 22nd, next Wednesday, we've got Richard Sexton of AECL talking about AECL's critical role in science and technology and overseeing our legacy waste program. So I think with that, we're a few minutes over, but I think we could have gone on a long time, but I'm sure you have other things you need to do. Rumina, thanks so much for giving us so much of your time, and also for the preparation that you put into this, because those remarks and were very, very well thought through. I see a new image of the CNSC in your slides, which I really appreciate. Lots of pictures, few words. And of course, the way you deliver them is always special. So again, thank you, Rumina, for a wonderful poolside chat. I'm about to jump in my pool in a couple of minutes. Thanks, Joe, for organizing another great webinar. And Nav, I guess you're still not, I guess we lost Nav. Anyway, thanks again, Rumina. Thanks you to your team, and keep us all safe as you always do.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us today for another OCNI Town Hall. Our topic today, Insights on Nuclear with CNSC, with our guest, Ms. Rumina Velshi, President and CEO of the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. I've been Joseph Bastien, the Manager of Indigenous Engagement and Special Projects for OCNI. Our host, Dr. Ron Oberth, President and CEO of OCNI. I want to thank all of our guests today for all the questions that they submitted in the chat feature and in our Q&A. We will be providing those comments to the CNSC for response. Thank you all. Have a wonderful weekend. Take care.